Just going to give it a minute or so before we dive into it. So if you want to just make sure your microphones are plugged in, that your voice is clear, do a few vocal warm-ups.
La 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 la.
Lovely.
How do I?
You cut out.
How do I sound on it on the stream?
Sounds good.
Because every time I seem to go on it, I keep getting the double loop, so I hear double of me.
That sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, we've got 5 viewers straight away, so I'm gonna kickstart. So lovely. Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
so cool. If you guys are just joining in and have no idea what this is EZConvos, where we talk about a wide range of subjects and topics across the world that affect everyone in some way or maybe in no way, but it's good for us to share our experiences. And you guys are welcomed and indeed encouraged to get involved. So tonight's talking point is it time to move on from meat? If not, why not? So that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. So just a quick intro from me. Some interesting facts that I found, or statistics. So from the World Counts, a website, 180 million tons of meat were eaten this year. That's quite a huge sum, to be honest. And today alone, that consumption number has increased by 699,000. And it's increasing every day. It keeps increasing. Demand is going up. This is potentially a problem. So it causes greenhouse gas emissions via the methods of production. This obviously plays a role in climate change, which is also, very much in the forefront in today's era. It requires more energy, water, and land to produce meat than any other food source. Biodiversity also is reduced. So apparently 60% of global biodiversity, that includes species, is lost because of meat-based diets. However, on the flip side, is meat a good source of proteins? Yes, it is. It's a good source of protein, vitamin, and minerals. According to the NHS website, it's good as part of a balanced diet. It has protein, iron, and it's a source of vitamin B12. What about, it's in our nature. We were supposed to have an omnivorous diet, right? When we were hunter-gatherers, we were eating berries, plants, vegetables during seasons when we couldn't get meat. But when we could get meat, we were very much, going out there to get it. Meat is a staple in many diets. Traditional cuisine is a lot of them are founded on the consumption of meat. Rightly or wrongly, it's also perceived that meat is kind of easy to purchase. It's cheap. So in my own experience, living in London, you can't walk down the road without tripping over a chicken shop or a kebab shop. Whereas on the flip side, perhaps healthier alternatives aren't as advertised or aren't as affordable. That could be right, that could be wrong, but we're going to discuss that today. So is it time to move on from meat? So the first participant I'm going to get involved is Philip. So if you just want to introduce yourself and share your thoughts.
All right, great. My name's Philip. I've been vegan for 4 years now. I'm going to share a little bit about my story of where it all started from. So about 10 years ago, I quit milk. Why did I do that? I had a lot of eczema and asthma. I couldn't run, be around pollen, or even if I laughed too much, sometimes that would trigger me. I couldn't eat a lot of different foods. That would also trigger me. So I finally found out that, essentially, a lot of different foods can trigger my health conditions. And when I quit milk, after 2 weeks, my eczema disappeared from my hands. So from there, I kind of went down this whole rabbit hole of learning more and more about different approaches, like what is raw veganism, what's juicing, stuff like, do saunas and homeopathy and infrared therapy and all this kind of stuff. Does that help? Ultimately, I got to a stage where I've really improved my health. I think mainly because of juicing, really clean diet, raw foods. So as well as the whole ethical debate about is it wrong to kill animals? Which I'm definitely going to argue that it is wrong. There's also the health aspect, which, in my opinion, I think veganism is a healthier diet for people. It can improve your health. Obviously, if you're going to eat like a lot of fake meat and fried chicken, fried fake chicken or fried chips or whatever, it's probably not healthy. But moving towards more nutritious food, high in antioxidants, high in essential fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, things like chlorophyll you can only get from plants. If you only eat a meat diet, for example, you would be nutritionally deficient. If you didn't eat any meat, you'd definitely have a sufficient amount of nutrients and minerals. There's a lot of vegan athletes now. If you watch the documentary, which I highly recommend, it's on Netflix. It's called The Game Changers. It literally just, I mean, it pretty much just debunks the myth that you can't be healthy on a vegan diet. A lot of the athletes there are absolutely smashing it. A lot of them are commenting how going onto a vegan diet actually improve their health. So yeah, it seems to be a lot of evidence that it's better for your health. And then we can also talk about animals being tortured. I mean, it's really dark what happens in slaughterhouses. If you see some of the footage from what happens, it's pretty grim. So I don't know if my 2 minutes is up, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. Very, very good point. So you're obviously very much in favour of moving on from meat, right? Doing away with it. We don't need it anymore. We don't need to subject animals to that suffering. If I'm understanding you correctly, that's your kind of stance, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think I'm always like opposed to kind of political intervention. So I wouldn't say, making it illegal or something that doesn't to be the right way. But I think along with education, increasing awareness, you can help people learn, just try it on themselves. Like, what's the best way is just, try it. What harm is it going to do if you, do vegan for a month? Like, you might actually notice improvement.
Veganuary, right?
Yeah, veganuary. Or if not, then, but yeah, I'd argue that we should move towards, as a society, as a civilization, away from meat. It's just that it's become something that's linked to wealth. That's why you see an increase in meat consumption in places like in Africa and China, because the GDP is going up and the level of wealth in those countries is increasing. People associate consumption of meat with increased wealth. So that's why you can see a lot of people in those places, consuming more.
That's so some interesting points raised there. I know Ocean's with you. We're going to come back to Ocean. But first, Bethany Ann, I know you're a vegetarian, if I'm not mistaken. What are your own thoughts? What are your own experiences about meat? Do you think it's time we move on from it? Do we need it? Can it still be included as part of a balanced diet? What are your thoughts?
Right now, I'm like back on a meat diet, and that was purely because during the lockdown, the family I stayed with were meat eaters, and I didn't, I don't like to cause a fuss, but I will probably be going back to being.
Are you there? I think you cut out, Bethany. Hello? I think Bethany, I think you've cut out. So we're going to give her a few minutes to fix her connection issues. Ocean, does Ocean want to give her thoughts or her opinions on the topic?
Yeah, sure.
Nice.
Well, kind of related to what Phil was saying, I also came into veganism for health reasons. I sort of never really questioned why I was eating meat or dairy, things like that. Never really questioned my diet. And when I moved out, my parents' place, I sort of looked into what I want to be consuming, what I want my life to look like. And through research, I sort of became vegetarian first. And then for me, the big change was dairy as well, for the similar reasons as Philip. Just realizing that it was massively disruptive for hormones, for skin issues, acne. A lot of people suffer from acne at the moment. So yeah, I just really moved away from any animal products. I would argue more about the environmental impact, about the ethics than the health, because I know that's Phil's department. But yeah, I would argue more either not really veganism, but just Well, I don't know actually what the difference is between plant-based and veganism. I guess that veganism is more the overall way of life, and plant-based is more the diet. So yeah, I would argue more for veganism. Not using any animal products, either for clothes, for cosmetics, any cruelty-free animal tested things. So yeah, that's more my stance. It's just, for me, it's not that it's whether it's ethical or not. It's unnecessary. So if something is unnecessary and it's causing harm, I don't see why we're still doing it.
I think that's a very interesting point, because I think all of us here, and I think universally around the world, I think most sane people can all agree that no animal should undergo needless torture, right? No animal should be subjected to it if it's needless. And I think we can all agree on that. I think that the distinction comes in perhaps is the definition of who deems it needless, right? So for vegans, you guys, I guess the killing of any animal is, abhorrent. It shouldn't be done. I suppose some eaters might make the argument that in some environments where other food sources are scarce, they might say, well, it's a means to an end. It's to help us survive, I suppose. But I think, good points. Pat, would you like to give us your thoughts as well?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm basically similar lines to Philip and Ocean here, where I kind of feel that if you can avoid inflicting suffering and pain on other creatures, animals, to do, what's in your ability to prevent that from happening. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say. Like, I know that it's something that I would be tempted to try out. I haven't actually tried it yet, but I have been doing some reading into it regarding the benefits that it has. And as Philip said, the antioxidant side of it. Apparently it's helped with. There's been countless other studies where it's shown to like reduce people with certain diseases, in lessening pain, stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely something I would like to further investigate and just question those of you in here that have actually tried it, and to see the effects it's had on you whilst changing from an omnivorous diet to a vegan one.
I think what we're going to do in the discussion stage is I'm going to ask you guys why you guys are vegan, and why you think some people are meat eaters. I'll pose that question to myself, obviously, as well, because I am someone who eats meat as part of a balanced diet. Well, at least I tell myself that. But I think Bethany Ann's back. So Bethany Ann, before we go on to the discussion stage, I want to get Bethany Ann's thoughts. Are you here, Bethany Ann? Can you hear us?
1 2 1 2. Bethany.
No, what I'll do is I'll kick her and we'll try and invite her again. So just move on to that topic, and I'll just try to fix this quickly with her.
Okay, so she's having some issues with her connection. Just a heads up for anyone who's watching, or if you guys here don't know, she's in New Zealand at the moment. It's like 8 o'clock there. She's doing us a huge favor waking up to get involved in a rather deep topic when she's probably still in the middle of a deep sleep. So that's probably why she's having some. Maybe now, Bethany Ann? We can see your mic lights in here. Oh, hello. Say something, Bethany Ann?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yay!
Yay.
I don't know what happened.
Okay, so Bethany Ann, do you want to give us your thoughts? You were cut off when you were speaking, so we'll come back to you.
Okay, yeah, I was just saying from my own experience, when I went vegan for a while, I was doing yoga alongside it, and it was a very similar experience to what they described in Game Changers, where like I felt like I was full more, and I was more energized. I slept better, so I agreed with that documentary, and it just made me realize like the whole eating meat, was it just a way of especially for male athletes, it was a way of trying to make them feel manly, and it was just a way to make them spend money. And it was actually like based on lies. But then I don't know how accurate that documentary was either, because you could argue it was slightly biased because they didn't take into account like other factors that could have affected all those athletes' performances. So I'm not entirely sure. The way I would look at it is, is it time to end meat? I would say yes, but it has to be everybody's own individual choice. You can't force it on them. I think because we're like such intelligent beings, we should sort of have some empathy and morals about the way we treat animals, at least. So I think if you move into like free range or organic farming or whatnot, that's one thing. But on the other hand, like I know from being in a big family of 10 children, that's not always realistic. You can't always go and have like free range this and organic that, because it costs a lot of money. So at the same time, I can understand other families, they have these strong views on animals and they empathize, but it's how you can afford to pay for like free range and organic and whatnot. But I feel like, yes, it has to be up to individuals. You can't force it on them. They've known about this for years. At the end of the day, they've known how animals have been treated. It's nothing new, but I do think perhaps there's a bit more awareness, and that's why there's like a rise in people who do like veganuary, or there's a rise in people who are vegan or who are vegetarianism. So yeah, it's just up to individuals at the end of the day.
Some really good points there. And before we go, so basically for the discussion stage now, that's something I want everyone to bear in mind. The idea of why are people still eating meat? So we've heard all of these amazing benefits, and it sounds like it's a win-win situation if you turn vegan, right? And I think all of us here are in disagreement with the benefits of it. It's it increases your it makes you feel good. You don't have to kill animals to live a good life. So I guess that raises the question, and kind of linking in with what you said, Bethnyan, as to why people eat meat. So I'd like to offer that to you for the discussion now. Actually, why are people eating meat if the alternative is so much better?
Yeah, I think that's that's a great question, and I think it's really, I don't want to say easy to explain, but what you've got to bear in mind is that people have habits, and especially something like food, it's really close to people's heart. It's really cultural. People, have, famous dishes from their countries, fish and chips, English breakfast, all of these dishes are really related to people's, identity, right? And the thing is, the reason why people, if you gave someone a lot of evidence, they won't just switch overnight, is because it takes a lot of effort. It takes adequate meal planning, changing your entire cookbook, changing the the things you buy in the grocery shop, and that's effort for a lot of people. If they're kind of on the fence, half convinced, half not convinced, just the fact that you got to buy different stuff in the shop is enough to put someone off.
I'd just like to point out that Philip comes from a Polish background, and Polish people love their meat and their heavy products. So for him to be a vegan, he's essentially a super vegan. For him to make that transition over. So listen to what he says.
This is true. Vodka is vegan, though.
Is it?
Yeah, vodka made of potato.
Oh, okay. So maybe I could consider becoming a vegan now. I wanted to, like, what do you guys think? For me personally, I think I completely agree with what Bethnyan said. I think meat is an easy access. It's there. It's in the shops. It's on the streets. It's relatively cheap. I think there's maybe it's a misconception or not. I think Philip, you could chime in here, or Bethnyan or Ocean. There's a conception that people have regarding healthy living being relatively expensive, so kind of out of the budget for many families. Is that true? Is there some merit to that? Or
vegetables are cheap. Rice, potatoes, pasta. That's the cheapest foods. If you go down the meat aisle, everything's like, 4, 5, 6, 7, £8 for a packet of meat. Whereas, of bag of potatoes and carrots and frozen peas and some tins, that's pretty much the cheapest stuff in the shop, and that stuff is really filling. Obviously, if you want to go for blueberries and strawberries and organic, that's going to cost more.
I think that raises an interesting point. Like, so you're saying maybe the idea of veganism that's been perpetuated by the media or whatever is this kind of upper class blueberries person that shops at Waitrose and gets any number of random topic items that you've never heard of. Whereas in reality, what you're saying is actually healthy living is really affordable. It's tins, like you said, tins of carrots, peas, potatoes. That stuff is actually cheap. You're very right, actually. Pat, I haven't heard you. What are your thoughts on what we're talking about, basically?
Do you mind just rephrasing the question?
Yeah, so basically, if veganism is so good and the benefits are many, and why are people still eating meat?
I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think it could be down to economics, financial, good marketing. I think, as Bethany Ann said as well, certain circumstances as well, especially if you're walking through like a store, for example, you see certain deals and they generally tend to be bulk meat here, really pretty cheaply priced. They tend to opt for those sort of things, and I think some of it may also be ignorance and just lack of knowledge regarding the potential benefits as well. But I know that there have also been studies where a lot of people who decided to go vegan often retracted and went back to eating meat, because generally like a large portion of them found the diets themselves pretty bland. So yeah, I think there are quite a lot of reasons behind like why people would do it. But yeah,
I think, sorry to cut you off, I think that's an interesting point. I think I summarized it as people choosing the path of least resistance and picking what appeals to them most. So kind of like a hedonistic argument. It's kind of like a cop-out, but some people argue, well, I like meat. Animals are there. Animals are there for us, basically. I like the taste of meat. I don't like the taste of the vegan alternatives. I only live once. Therefore, I'm going to enjoy myself, eat fucking tasty, meaty foods, and that's that. What would you say to that? How would you counter that? That kind of argument, that kind of selfish, I suppose, hedonistic approach
me.
to anyone. That's the question to anyone who wants to give their thoughts. Yeah,
I would agree. I would say I would agree with that. Vegan. What I noticed is I went vegan.
Bethany, your mic keeps cutting out, Bethany.
You hear me?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, just yeah.
When I went vegan and gluten-free, trying to find like anything was really difficult, and I felt like I was actually eating the same thing over and over, and it was really bland. And then I went to being a vegetarian, and I had a lot more options, and I think that's because the vegetarian options, they have like a lot of substitute for meat, so it feels like you're eating an actual chicken nugget or an actual piece of meat, but it's not.
Chickpeas are amazing. Chickpeas are amazing for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it is a lot of it. It tastes. Maybe people just don't like the taste of it. Maybe it's also a pride thing. People have a bit of an ego, and if you've gone around for years, I know in the Game Changers there was that wrestler, and he was making fun of this other wrestler who actually beat him because he was on a vegan plant-based diet. I think a lot of it is like a pride thing. I'm right, you're wrong. Also, people could argue, okay, so we're not going to kill the animals. Do we actually need them anymore? Do we need to farm them? Will they just be killed anyway by another animal? So, yeah, maybe it's looking at it like that's some people's views. And yeah, it's very, like Philip said, it's hard for people to actually make a change. It takes a lot to say, okay, yeah, you know what, maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to put the effort into look at a new diet, because people can't be bothered. The last thing they want to do when they go home is start looking up like new foods and whatnot. People just do the same thing. It's easy.
Yeah, so the path of least resistance. Philip, did you want to chime in on that?
Actually, I'm going to butt in
Ocean,
there.
yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Of course.
Really good point about, people going home and not wanting to think about what they're going to eat. They just want to eat the same thing as usual, or just, what's available. And I think that's raising a bigger problem, is that people are completely disconnected to what they eat. And I mean, I might take it to a more spiritual level here, but hey, that's expected from me, eh? But it's just we just go to the supermarket and we're just used to eating the same thing. We just see it as fuel, right? It's just sustenance. That's just what we put in our bodies, and it keeps us going. But we become what we eat, and that's so true on so many levels. We absorb all the nutrients, and the reason why some people, when they switch to a vegan diet, might think that it's bland, or that they're just bored of what they're eating, or is tin legumes and beans and rice and pasta, is because in most of the, like, maybe not junk food, but all the food that we eat in general, fried chicken, things like that, it's just, there's a lot of like what's it called, like flavor enhancers, a lot of artificial flavoring. So that's not healthy either, and I'm not necessarily making a case for hyper healthy veganism, because that's just, as we stated before, very expensive and not accessible to everyone. But when we remove all of these artificial flavors, all of these flavor enhancers, then yeah, it is becoming quite bland. But thankfully, we've got countless spices available to us to just give a bit more flavor back into our food. And you're completely right. It's just people don't want to think about it, and unfortunately, that is making us completely disconnected. And I personally, I think that is why we are seeing a rise in illnesses. People are just completely disconnected. There's a symptom, there's an illness appearing, we just take meds and not think about it instead of trying to find the cause. And as Phil and I mentioned before, and I think most people when they turn vegan experience as well, is that when you start thinking about what you're eating and what you're putting into your body, you sort of naturally go down the road of becoming more conscious and becoming more healthy and health oriented, because you start connecting more with how you're feeding yourself, and what your energy levels are like, or what actually it means to feed yourself adequately. And a lot of people become these hyper healthy vegans because that's sort of a more conscious way of eating.
So you are what you eat, basically, and taking a more, so people that take a more conscious approach to what they're putting inside their bodies are perhaps more inclined to opt for a vegan diet. Essentially, that's an interesting one. I just wanted to, so we got a question on the Twitch chat. Woohoo, the first one. So Lewin mate says, if everyone went vegan, all the rainforests would be gone, and millions of wild and endangered animals would die, as vegan products need more land than meat farms to feed the same amount of people. I think that's something you want to jump on.
Yeah, can I rebut that? We'll try to rebut it at least. The issue is there is a lot of, I know it's going to go into politics and follow the money kind of thing, but there is a lot of vested interests. There's a big dairy and meat industry, and they're in the same way that there was a cigarette propaganda, in the start of the 20th century. The same thing now. There's a lot of if you look into the dairy industry, they also have a lot of funding. So if you look at the studies, there's as much studies saying that milk is bad as there are that says that milk is good. And if you look into it, what seems to be the case is that scientists are kind of forced to falsify data, or at least that's what people say, falsify data to make a certain result so that they can then publish that data and be like, see, milk is good for you. But yeah, so the point was that that's related to propaganda, marketing or news that is not necessarily true. And I think that this is not true, this statement that we're going to mow down the Amazon rainforest for making vegan products, because to create 1 pound of meat, for example, takes 10 pounds of grains. You have to feed an animal 10 times as much stuff. So, if you want to create 100 tons of meat, you need to have 1,000 tons of grains fed to those animals. So if everyone went vegan, we'd be able to eat the grains directly without the middleman involved. I honestly think this statement by Lewin does seem to be just around the propaganda. I've looked into it myself. There's a lot of documentaries that also talk about this, like Cowspiracy, etc.
I think at the end of the day, it's just very unclear because it's mostly predictions, right? So it's quite easy to put a prediction in one way or point to another direction. As far as we stand now, we're already destroying the rainforest, and we're on a heavy meat diet, generally speaking, as a society, as a world. So it could be the case, it could not. The thing is, the way we're eating now it seems to not be sustainable. So I guess it's the lesser evil. Only time will tell, I suppose. I'm not 100% sure that it's true. I'm not 100% sure that eating more meat or as much meat or less meat is also the answer. But that is a good point. It's something that people should consider.
Interesting. We've talked a lot. Okay, so quite a lot we've gone through. We've talked about the health benefits of it. I know Ocean mentioned in particular the kind of environmental benefits it would have that would come around as a result of people opting for a more vegan diet. So we talked a lot about the kind of health, the benefits of it. What I wanted to talk about, something that a question from me actually, a thing from me. I think something that even if you tell people this is going to benefit you, this is amazing, even if you tell them it's affordable, it's within your budget, I think, if I'm being honest, one of the things that perhaps deters people from trying veganism, and again, this is from my experiences and in a social media age, the idea of this, when people think of veganism, a lot of the time before they do their research, and I'll be honest, I was one of those people, having a best mate like Philip who's kind of shed light on it, and my sister shedding light on what healthy living actually is, what it encompasses. I've kind of learned a lot from it. But prior to that, this idea of a vegan, when you thought of a vegan, you'd think of some do you know what I mean? There's like the vegan
Stereotype.
Stereotype, perfect, exactly. And I think that stereotype, unfounded or not, I think it's unfair to say that it's true of all vegans. Obviously, it's not. Stereotypes are always exaggerated. That's the whole nature of a stereotype. But I think that stereotype has a part to play in deterring people from trying it, which is obviously unfortunate. What do you guys think of the stereotype, the vegan stereotype? Do you think that has a part to play in people choosing, perhaps as a reaction, as a kind of, no, I'm not going to try that actually, in spite of all the benefits, even if they presented the benefits? And do you think that has a part to play in deterring people from trying it? Anyone?
I mean, that's a difficult one to kind of argue. There's always going to be contrarians that are just going to jump on and try to.
If I'm being honest, my own experience, I think even when you was telling me all the benefits about it, Philip, like you'd go through, this is good, and I'd be like, yeah, I agree with that, but I don't want to be a vegan. And you're like, what? But it does this, and you can increase that and that. I'm like, yeah, that sounds really good, but I don't want to be I don't want to be one of those vegans. And you're like, what? So for me personally, I think that it's a bit of a shallow argument to make, but I guess the argument, the role stereotypes play in putting people off trying stuff, I think that's something that maybe some people is preventing some people from trying it out. Pat, I know you mentioned that you're considering trying some sort of, I guess, was it vegan or just healthy living approach?
Yeah, I'd definitely be open to at least giving it a shot, just to seeing the effects, because we can always read and talk about things, but you won't really know yourself unless you actually take the liberty to actually try something to see how it affects you. Like as Bethany Ann said, if it improves sleep and all these other things, endurance, stamina, or whether maybe it just doesn't coincide and just work as well as your previous diet did. But I do believe, sometimes it's good to actually just experiment and try things out. But yeah, at the same time, I do kind of agree with what you said, because sometimes you will get strands of people that, for whatever reason.
Extremists, basically.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And maybe to some degree you might be able to sympathize with their cause, especially if they really are incredibly passionate with what they do. But it's a way of delivering the message, and how they deliver it that can be just as counterproductive to what they want. So although they may want to really highlight to animal cruelty or the benefits of going on a vegan diet, it's the way that they protrude their message, whether it be through like a nice general, civil means, or going through supermarkets, chaining themselves, splattering blood around the place, screaming in people's faces, stuff like this, that, that's just completely just goes out the window. And
Well,
a
that's
lot
an
of
interesting-
people might just deliberately just, fuck that, just eat meat just in spite of you. So yeah, sorry Phil, what were you going to say?
No, sorry to butt in. That's an interesting kind of point, is about how people do their activism, because obviously there's a lot of vegan activists, and obviously I've tuned into quite a lot of them, watch their, YouTube videos or whatever. And for example, if you look at like, just to name names, there's one called Joey Carbstrong, and on the other hand, you've got Earthling Ed. So Joey Carbstrong is quite a militant vegan. I think he's even not self-professed, but people call him a militant vegan. And essentially what that means is that he's very direct with his approach. He's not afraid to, when he's doing activism on the streets, he's not afraid to say it how it is. He'll be like, you're paying for murder. You're murdering and raping. You're paying for murder and rape to happen. They're putting, fists in the cow's ass for you. They're grinding up baby chicks because you're paying for it. So he will say it like that. And that really puts off a lot of people. Then on the other hand, you've got someone like Earthling Ed, who's so eloquent, so well spoken, very kind, big heart. And when he speaks about veganism, he's very much like, how are we doing this to treat animals like that? It's really not kind. Would you treat your family like that? Where they're basically your family, because we both have emotions. We have more in common than we have in different. So then the question is, whose activism is more effective, right? And from my understanding, my research, it actually seems like some people prefer the activism of someone like Joey, and some people prefer the activism of someone like Ed. Some people, if you speak to them gently, kindly, they'll be like, it doesn't go through to them. Whereas if you speak like Joey,
to the dirty truth of the matter,
That's the thing that I would say, though, like how much of that is them actively doing it, or following a bandwagon mentality, or mob rule, for fear of for being intimidated into it. So how much of them is actively they themselves taking the choice to do it out of their own volition, and how much of that is somehow being coerced to do it for?
Not to cut you guys off when you guys continued, but I have two people that might join. One of them is James. He's someone who tried a vegan diet, but he stopped. So it would be interesting to hear why. Yeah, so if you guys are cool with that,
let's do it.
Philip Ocean.
Yeah, sure.
And another guy, I've invited Lewin, mate, as well, to join the Discord.
Oh damn, we're gonna get destroyed here. Fuck.
So yeah, that they might join at any moment. Bethany Ann, I know you haven't spoken for a bit. Are there any things that you want to talk about? You okay?
I was just thinking about the people who go to the extreme, and I remember looking at like a video, and they were like in the supermarket. What were they doing? They had like smashing plates with blood on their face or something, and I just really disagreed. I just thought,
do you think that works?
No, you don't you don't make other people feel like that, like when there's kids about and stuff. I think, yeah, like Philip said, if you deliver it in a certain, it's just about how you deliver it. But then I know not everyone will receive it the same. But I don't know. I sometimes think it's up to the individual. It's your own individual journey. For Philip and I, had we not had bad skin, would we have ever went down
Yeah.
that route. I don't know. And I also, on the other hand, I would also say a lot of vegans and whatnot, they also get a lot of backlash and stigma from other people. Like, I know when I went down that route, a lot in the family was sort of like making fun of me in a way. And yeah, so it works both ways, you know.
That's a good point. I just want to. You mentioned people's individual journeys leading them to veganism. So it's interesting because some people might go to veganism because of, I want to eat healthy, whereas others might explore it as I want my skin to be clearer, and you end up going down the same route, which is quite interesting. It kind of speaks volumes of the benefits of veganism. That's an interesting one. What I wanted to say, this is a devil's advocate question I'm going to pose to Ocean. So Ocean, I know you mentioned the argument pertaining to, killing animals is essentially, it's murder. They feel pain. If it can be avoided, why aren't we avoiding it? And I think we're all in agreement with that. What about the argument that I've read, but that says plants can feel pain to a certain degree? So there's been studies into that. What would you say to that?
In all honesty, I don't have an answer at all. And again, what I would say is, what is the lesser evil? My stance on it is that, and I suppose that's the argument that a lot of people have as well, to eat certain animals and not others, is that my understanding is that animals are very close to humans in the way they have bonds with each other, have families, have a nervous system. It is true that plants, I don't know if feel is the right word, is the right terminology, but they do have some sort of network. They do work together. They, they don't have blood, but they have awareness. Exactly. Does it mean that they have consciousness? I don't know. Does it mean that they feel pain? I don't know. What I know is that when I see slaughterhouse footage, I see animals in pain, animals trying to fight to stay alive, animals that do not want to die. And I remember a very good argument that actually my grandfather pointed out to me, is that plants cannot move. They're staying put. So they can't avoid danger or, death in a way. So it's bound to happen for them. They're bound to be destroyed, eaten by animals, by humans.
Insects.
Insects. Whereas animals can, they can run. We can run. We're animals. They can run away from danger. They have this survival instinct that plants don't really have. They're just, they're rooted. They can't really flee danger. Whereas animal, they try to, survive at all costs. So that's, I suppose, my stance on it, is that if something cannot save themselves, it's in terms of evolution, it's more likely to be meant for eating and consumptions rather than animals being able to flee. It's a bit more of a survival thing. And I think if something wants to live or is doing everything it can to live, then you should let it live.
I think that's a very good argument, actually. And I appreciate the fact that you mentioned it's the lesser of two evils. Ultimately, if we keep, looking at it in such a, with that kind of level of, that being so meticulous, we're not going to eat anything. We're just going to die.
Yeah, and you can't be perfect, in anything. And I don't think perfection is what we should strive for. It's just, how can I make better choices for me or for people around me, my environment? It's not about being perfect.
It's like a utilitarian argument almost. So, doing the greatest happiness that you possibly can for the greatest number of things. And I think we're all in agreement that an animal, a dolphin, a pig, is far more similar to us than, say, a plant in your garden, So James should be joining us any second now. Before he does, I don't know, Pat, if you remember reading this book. It was like a philosophy book I read when I was like 12 years old. And I remember one of the stories that stood out to me. I just remember it very vividly.
Around the campfire?
No, do you remember the talking pig?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and basically, I know, Philip, I know you don't like your theoretical, what if, but that's never going to happen. But what if an animal were created who wanted to die. So the animal wanted to die. It was born and it had an imprint and it tried to kill itself all the time. It wanted to die. That was its purpose. Would it be morally acceptable to eat the animal?
After it died naturally.
But what if it wanted to kill itself? So you have a sheep and it keeps ramming its head into an electric fence and you're like, what are you doing, sheep? And it keeps going, please. Would it be okay? I know it's a very outlandish argument, but
Suicidal
I just
sheep.
wanted
Yeah,
to-
okay.
Yeah, suicidal sheep.
Well, is it similar to like if you run over like a deer in your car and you either leave it there or you make use of it and eat it? I think it's your own view.
Okay,
Like,
what about roadkill? So something less crazy.
yeah, I agree with that. I think that's okay. I think if you've made an accident, instead of just leaving it there to be of waste, even if you're a vegan family, you just give it to, or even give it to another animal. But like, yeah, don't.
Would you say it's acceptable then? Yeah, Beth, do you say it's acceptable? Philip, what would you say? So roadkill, for example. Could
John,
you?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to be really honest here. And yeah, we can definitely go down this debate, and maybe if we were in a desert island, we can do that debate as well.
Yeah, it is
It's just
very.
like
Yeah.
really random hypothetical scenarios that people that aren't vegan like to entertain.
I'm just gonna interrupt Phil there because I can. Well, you're pointing it as a sheep, but the thing is, why do you have to eat it? If it was a baby human, would you eat it? Because otherwise, it would just go to waste. Like, it's an animal dying, or on its way to dying. It doesn't mean that you have to make the most of it. Like the natural predator in the chain of natural life will eat it when it's dead. It doesn't mean that you have to make the most of it. If it was a baby, you wouldn't think that way. If it was a dog, you wouldn't think that way.
True, that's very true. Actually, I it was an outlandish argument. I just wanted to present something.
Fair enough.
Interesting.
James, hello. So James is here. So James,
Hello.
Hello.
hey mate,
Hey,
how are you doing? You all right?
Good.
So
I would say I would probably eat the sheep if it was
You would?
roadkill.
straight into it. Okay, so why would you eat the sheep?
I just think don't put it to waste. I think it's bad if it's in a big industrial thing, they're just getting like bred to be killed and stuff all the time over and over again. If it's like a roadkill accident or sort of something like that, and you're like, well, it's just going to be there, foxes are going to eat it or something like that, I don't see anything massively wrong with that.
Well, you're depriving the fox of a meal.
Yes, that is, yeah.
If you weren't so greedy, if you walk down the road a tiny bit, there's loads of berries over there, but you had to eat it, didn't you?
What sorry if I can just interject. I think the bigger argument here that needs to be done is like, because you know, if you ask me that, I would still, because I'm vegan, I wouldn't say, oh well, because the sheep died from getting hit by a car, then I'll make an exception. I think the fundamental difference is that when I used to walk down the meat aisle in the shop, I used to think, oh, bit of bacon, yeah, I fancy that, or chicken, oh, that'd be really nice on the barbecue. Now when I walk through that aisle, I literally see a morgue, a funeral. I see like dead corpses. They're dead, like dismembered bodies. I can't look at meat in the same way. It looks like fucking organs. Like how can you see that and be like, oh yeah, fancy that on the barbecue? Like it kind of surprises me that 5-10 years ago, that's what I would have thought.
On that note, that's actually interesting because I know James. I know you were a vegan. So Sebastian was telling me you tried a vegan diet.
I tried a vegan diet, yeah. It was just because my diet was horrendous. I'd be eating like anything, basically. I'd just eat anything. I'll just have it all. And I thought, I watched Game Changers.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people watch that. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I'll give this a go and I'll see how it goes. And I probably did it for, I'd say probably 5 months, maybe half a year.
Oh, nice.
It was good, but the worst thing is I just don't like cooking.
Yeah.
I can't cook.
Yeah.
And I need things to be really quick and easy.
Yeah.
And I found after a period of time, it would just be like, I'll be eating the same stuff again. And I thought, I'll try something else. So I still have days where I completely don't have meat.
Right.
And I try and balance out to not have as meat as much in my diet. I only have it a couple days. I'm trying to go gluten free at the minute. I'm just trying stuff to see how it goes. But I do think everyone should try it. And definitely understand that you are impacting massively by having meat every day is not good.
That's actually I like how you mentioned that you go a few days without trying meat. You're not having meat every single day. That's
Not every single day, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's something a lot of meat eaters tend to use. Tend to say, we don't have meat every day. Do you think subconsciously meat eaters are aware that perhaps what they're doing is wrong when they try to cut down on the amount of meat they're eating?
I think it's more than just not aware of how much meat they're actually eating. Like my mum now tries it. My dad's just like, no, I'm going to eat meat all the time. But my mum has noticed, like, yeah, I'm not buying as much meat. It's like, it's just so. I think she's doing like way less meals on meat. My brother did it first. He still does a few days as well. It's just a better balance. I think like I feel healthier on it. It's just easier. I think you don't feel as like bloated or heavy eating meat the whole time.
Definitely.
Do you feel, James? Do you feel that there's an argument to be made for having meat whilst having healthy food as well? So kind of supplementing one with the other. Do you think you can have both? Can both exist in a vacuum?
I think you can have
both.
both.
Way or the highway? Yeah.
I think you can have both, but I don't know too much detail into like how it affects people and that sort of thing. I'm just going on how it makes me feel when I have meat, and how I know maybe a couple hours after you just don't feel like as peak as you would be if you were just a vegan. Like when you have vegan, you constantly feel quite light, not hungry.
So true.
You never really feel hungry. You just feel quite light, so you never feel like sluggish or like tired.
I was watching a YouTube video, and there was a couple, and the lady was vegan for a while, and then the guy was like, well, she wasn't trying to influence him basically, and they were just kind of being really open about the whole thing. And he said, then you kind of convinced me to have a smoothie in the morning, or I saw you making like a huge salad for lunch, and I would I'd have the smoothie, I'd have the salad. And then, when it got to like lunch or dinner time, then I'd have like a big, steak, big burger, big wrap or something full of meat. And it was just so weird because for the beginning of the day, when I had my smoothie and I had my salad, all plant-based, it was really nice and I felt really light and full of energy. The moment I had that huge burger, I'd be like, oh my God, I feel so
shut
fat.
down, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason for that is from my kind of deep dive into going down the rabbit hole on natural health and food and stuff, is essentially because you're putting in so much stuff into your bloodstream that takes so much of your life energy to process. Like it takes, when we're digesting, we're using 80% of our energy to digest, which actually brings us to a larger conversation, which I think is about intermittent fasting. How often do we eat? We're not designed to be eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is a big delusion. I think we're supposed to actually be eating one meal a day, or maybe two.
So at the minute, my big thing is, I eat all my food in an 8-hour period.
Yeah, intermittent fasting. Yeah.
I have my breakfast at say 10, and I won't have any food after 6 o'clock.
Yeah, yeah.
And probably I don't really have a very big dinner, so like my breakfast is like a porridge. Lunch will be the main thing. It would be maybe a chicken wrap or a falafel wrap, depending on what day. And then dinner will be a soup or like a pizza, nothing really heavy. And then that's it.
Yeah. So
and then once every 2 weeks or every other week, I have a whole day of no food. So I'll finish at 6 and then next day I won't eat. So I have a whole, what is it? I think it's like a 36-hour fast or something till I next time eat. And I think it works for me. But you have to do your intermittent fasting slowly. You can't just suddenly go to like a whole day no food, 24 hours. You got to slowly get into it.
You're building up your glycogen reserve in your liver. That's what it is.
I just wanted to, just quickly, I'm going to bring it to Bethany in a second. James, I just wanted to ask, is there anything that would make you go back to a vegan diet? You seem, you know the benefits of it. You've mentioned how good it was. The whole idea of intermittent fasting, it goes hand in hand with a vegan diet, I suppose. What would make you, if anything,
If I was
Turn that-
able to plan my meals better and
Right.
have time to cook, because my issue is,
So would you say it's the path of least resistance thing? It's a kind of convenience. This is
Yes.
easier for me right now. Okay, so and would you say, if I was to say to Beth Nyan, would you say that the idea of convenience is a reason why perhaps most people aren't trying out veganism, the same way perhaps that most people don't try to pursue a career in sports or to nurture a talent that they may have had when they were a child, because it's easier not to. It's just the path of least resistance. What do you think, Beth Nyan?
I agree with that. I think a lot of people, it's putting in the effort, and I think they need to have some sort of end result. You can't just do it just because you want to please everyone else who's like pretty you. You need to sort of have like an intention in doing it, so you have like a result at the end. And for some people, it's like, I want to be healthier, but for some people, they don't have the same like conscience. They don't have the same moral, so they might not actually care for how the animals are. Some people think we're like superior beings. They don't think that means we have like a responsibility to look after animals or to treat them the same as us. Some people think they're there for our own use. They're put on the earth for us to eat. They don't, like in some places they eat dogs and whatnot. They don't. So I think it's just some people don't really care because they don't need to do it. So I just feel like I wouldn't actually want those people just to jump on the bandwagon if they don't really have the same attitudes and the same empathy. It's like, don't do it then.
That's a very interesting topic. I want us to close off on this one. The idea of not caring, not considering animals in the same regard as humans. So I have a friend, for example, who's a pretty staunch Christian, and in the Bible, well, in his interpretation of the Bible, animals have been put there by God. And I'm sure it's probably the same across many different religions, many different cultures. Animals have been put there for our use. Ergo, why are we even talking about it? Why are we considering them in the same light as humans? So what would you guys say to that kind of argument? Well, I will eat meat. They've been put here on this world for me to enjoy, to use, to eat, and nothing you will say will change that. It's written in my Bible, in my holy book. It's how I've been raised. Nothing will change that. What do you guys say to that? And that's open to anyone who wants to chime in.
I would say
That's a good point.
the reason why most people eat meat is probably because way back cave time, we ate a lot of vegetables, but we did eat meat. But the problem is humans have taken over so much. It's like no other thing in the planet comes close to humans. We control the planet and everything. So we've taken over the food of meat of animals too much. Like we've overproduced it, overkilled it. Because maybe back when it's like you look at royal families, rich people, their diets are all meat based, and they were predominantly probably more unhealthy, overweight, died earlier, when poorer people had more vegetables. So it's more, I think it's more you need to mix it and not kill as much meat, but everyone needs to up their veg, definitely.
But James, do you, if you're having a debate with someone and they're saying, and you're telling them, dude, go vegan, you can do this, everything's good about it, and the person's like, well, no, I'm not going to, because I'm a particular religion, and in my religion it says that animals are there for my use. I'm not considering them the same as I would a human. How would you, Ocean, would you like to get involved as well?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to butt in there. Well, my problem with it is that it's not really, we're not talking about animals, we're talking about a handful of animals, which has been conditioned for us to think that we can eat, and others that we can keep as pets, and other that we have to protect because they're endangered. If we're going to go down the road of animals are here for us to eat, then with that principle, we'd eat our cats, we'd eat our dogs, we'd eat rats in our apartments, we'd eat anything because they're animals.
I'll word it a bit differently. So how about the idea of animals simply being subservient to humans? Therefore, they are less than us. We can do what we want with them, be that eat them, be that kill them, be that use them for circus shows, whatever it is. The idea of animals being subservient, therefore the rules can't apply to them.
Well, I think that's a very ethnocentric view of the world, and
Oh, for sure,
I
I
mean
agree with
that is a religious view, which I was raised religious as well, so I've known that for most of my life. But we've evolved from animals. We are animals. Just because we have a very developed voice box doesn't mean that we are superior in any ways. We have managed to have an illusion of control of the world. But we are part of it. If it gets endangered, we get endangered. We might not realize it because we have comfort, but at the end of the day, we are part of the same world as the animals are. And if we don't protect it, we're not protecting ourselves. So yeah, we might see it as weaker because we can control these animals. But just because you can do something means that you should do it, right? That's that basic argument, isn't it?
Yeah, Pat. What about you? Do you think there's any room for negotiation with people that are like flat, staunchly opposed to the idea of affording animal these rights, looking at them in the same regard? Pat, you're there?
Yeah, I mean, like, you're always going to have a lot of differing opinions on this, and some people are just going to be unnegotiable from the get-go. If they're just stuck in their mode of thinking and there is just no stray unless they willingly allow themselves to actually attempt to be somewhat open-minded and to like listen to reason or good argumentation or whatnot, then yeah. But if they're just very rigorously enforced in their beliefs, it will be quite difficult to change those people's minds.
Fair enough. Okay. I think we're going to wrap it up there, guys. If anyone wants 30 seconds or so to share some closing thoughts, now's the time. So help yourself. Phil, do you want to go first?
I'd like to just say that I think a lot of the arguments that people make to try to rebut the vegan debate, a lot of them can be quite simply, that's the key thing, very easily, logically debunked. If you just go through the motions and just accept it. That's the reason why I'm vegan. I couldn't find a coherent argument against it. And yeah, I do agree with James. It is more work. So
at the beginning,
once you get used to it, it's a little bit easier. Once you know like your staple foods like frozen peas or just nuts and seeds, spices, and you know what fills you up. Once you do more research into it. But yeah, the point was that all of the arguments can be quite easily debunked. And what I think really you need to start from is going into your heart and making a decision like, yeah, I think the vegan debate is right, and I think I'm gonna make the effort myself to change my actions. So yeah.
Nice. James, do you want any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
I'll just say for everyone to give it a go. Not a quick little go, actually give it at least 4 or 5 months. Give it a go, because you can't do it for just 1 month and say, "Oh, I did it," because that's not long enough.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks for having me on.
Nice to have you, man. Feel free to join in any other discussions we have in the future. Bethany Ann, any closing thoughts all the way down in New Zealand?
I'm gonna go make myself some pancakes, but
Are they vegan pancakes? Are they vegan pancakes?
And they're meat free, so it's fine. No, I would say, ideally, I would like to, we can't just base it all on the past. We've progressed. I would like to think in the future, even if we are still eating meat, we've what you call it, intense farming or factory farming, are completely against that. I'd like just to see animals having a better life. They're not being separated from their mums and whatnot. I think it's the first step, and then over time perhaps we will just see like a massive reduction. But yes, it just comes down to the individual and what they want to achieve at the end of it. So yeah, maybe it's like a natural part of evolution that will maybe 100 years, 1,000 years from now, we'll look back at us eating meat and think, wow, what the hell are we doing? But
actually, sorry, one thing.
Yeah, sure, James.
What is your view on because scientists are now being able to grow like actual
chicken
nuggets meat from just like one cell, which still counts as meat. Is that
I saw that as well.
No animals.
Is that right? That's not okay, or?
Well, the animals didn't suffer, so
I have a problem with that.
from one cell.
But it's a cell from a chicken. Did the chicken ever exist? I don't know.
My problem with it is that it's still
Exploitation.
let people, but also it keep people into a loop of wanting to eat flesh.
Right.
You know, whether it's
Perpetuating.
from an animal that died or not, it's just like that same sort of like I'm craving meat.
Perpetuates the flesh is okay to eat.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. All right, well, that sounds quite deep. That could be something we discuss in the future. But
Veganism part 2.
veganism part, I think 100%. Veganism part 3,
part 2.
but maybe.
Okay, I'm gonna go and make some pancakes. So
thanks.
See you guys later.
I just wanted to say that it's been really nice having you guys here talking about it. This is how discussions should be. No one shouting at each other. Everyone having their say. Everyone hearing, the arguments for and against. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for joining, and thank you everyone for watching.